here. We know we can't require you to be here, but I think we have some very important information for you to hear tonight. My dream is for this to be interactive. How about that? Jack tells me he already has a question right there. Okay? So we have before us tonight four people who have a lot of information to share both with the students and with the parents about the realities of things that may face you in high school, legal realities. I'm a former lawyer myself, and so this is a really important program for me. We will talk about criminal law, we'll talk about civil law, we'll talk about the realities of choices that you can make that may go not so well. So if you guys would listen up, and if you have any questions, I know it will take a moment of bravery, but if you feel like you have something that you want to ask, please raise your hand or walk to the side. We're also working on getting some note cards. If you don't feel like standing up and asking, you can submit them through a note card. Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Norton will have some over here in just a few minutes. So first, let's start with our panelists, and if you all would please give them your utmost attention. We have Lieutenant Anthony McLean, and I could tell you all kinds of stuff about each of these people, but I've picked out a few things that I thought would capture your attention. So Lieutenant McLean here, at about the same age, a little older than some of you, enlisted in the United States Air Force at 17 years old and stayed in the Air Force for 5 years. After that, he enrolled at Tennessee State University, where he received his degree in criminal justice. And since his graduation from TSU, he's been with the Metro Police Department, so since 1997. He works in the West Precinct, which is the one that helps us here at MBA, and he has been on our panel in the past and will be the one to share information about what really the realities are of being there on the street, hopefully not, but maybe encountering a police officer. Next to him, we have John Day. John is a civil attorney. Does anybody know the difference between civil and criminal law? Okay. Okay, so listen, if you're in criminal law, you can be taken in by the police, right, down to the juvenile court or wherever, handcuffed, and you can be incarcerated. It would be things like breaking the statute, the codes of the state of Tennessee. Civil law is another kind of liability that mostly in this room is going to pertain to the parents. We added Mr. Day a few years ago because it's super important for you to know that under civil law in the state of Tennessee, your money and your assets can be taken for things that your children do if they cause harm to someone else. And John is a civil trial attorney. He graduated with honors from the University of North Carolina School of Law. He has written 4 books, authored over 70 articles and book chapters, and given over 300 continuing legal education speeches on issues of civil law. He has, and I know at least the boys will be impressed by this, he has been selected for inclusion in Best Lawyers of America for each of the last 25 years. How about that? And the reason that I invite him to this panel every year is because he is going to shoot straight. He has raised 3 kids. He knows what it's like, and he's got experience both as a parent and as a civil lawyer. Next to him is Magistrate Jennifer Wade. She is here on behalf of the juvenile courts of Davidson County. She is the newest magistrate down at Juvenile Court and is the director of the Juvenile Court Metro Student Attendance Center under the leadership of Judge Sheila Calloway, who is in New York this evening. Magistrate Wade graduated summa cum laude from TSU. She attended law school in Michigan, and basically her entire career, both as an intern during college and law school, and since then has been working with guys and girls your age. So she is kind of runs the gamut in her knowledge about what issues face kids and teens, and is here to help us with that. And lastly, we have General Glenn Funk, who is a parent of an MBA junior, Sam Funk. He is a veteran trial attorney with over 29 years of experience in the courtroom. He has worked as a public defender in the criminal system. He's worked as a private attorney. He has worked as an assistant district attorney, and currently he is the District Attorney General of the 20th Judicial District of Tennessee, which is Davidson County. So if you'll welcome our panelists. Okay, not to start it off on a negative note, but I read a couple years ago an article called "Why Parents of Teens Should Have a Defense Attorney on Speed Dial." Okay, and it brought up all kinds of realities of things that you guys could run into, mostly by accident, to be honest, or just by a few poor decisions. On their list of things was drinking, driving issues, drugs, shoplifting, graffiti, fake IDs, trespassing, bullying, texting, speeding, sexting, curfew, sexual assault, and online behavior. And most recently in the news, I don't know if some of you have seen the 5 teenagers in Michigan who have been charged with second-degree murder for playing a prank by dropping rocks off of an overpass over an interstate and recently killed a man in his 30s. So these are all very real issues that are right in front of us every day. Last year, or in 2015, the Department of Justice said that 2.75 million teenagers under the age of 18 were arrested in the United States, mostly for minor offenses, but some of those kids end up getting tried as adults. And of course, once you're 18, which is not very far off, you are an adult. In addition, there is an unprecedented number of juvenile victims of crime. And since I've been at MBA, and this is my 12th year, we're no exception to this rule, right? We go to school at these fancy schools, but all of this stuff still affects us and people we love. So parents, you face potential liability, criminal and civil, for your children's actions, and guys, you face liability for your own actions, particularly in the criminal system. We cannot address all of those, but we're going to touch on a few here. And I'm going to start by a question that was sent in by a parent who couldn't be here tonight that has to do with, and y'all can laugh at me because I don't know what this is, but with something called maybe Juul, J-U-U-L. See, I told you. Fair enough. So my understanding from Wikipedia, this is the one and only time I would use that as an authoritative source, is that it has something to do with vaping and electronic cigarettes. So we're going to start with General Funk down there on the end and let him talk to you a minute about the true facts and law regarding vaping, smoking, and any kind of e-cigarettes.
Great. Thanks, Annie B. Whether it's tobacco, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, dip, vaping products, any possession of those by someone under the age of 18 is an offense and can get you arrested or cited by the police department. So if you say, well, I'm not really smoking, I'm just doing this, or this is just chewing tobacco, or you know what, the older kids in school said this would relax me. If you get caught with it, you're under 18, that's an offense, and it can lead to a potential arrest or a citation, and then you could end up in juvenile court.
All right, so is that clear? Right, y'all laugh, I mean, but it seems to be unclear sometimes, right? You just can't have it. You can't possess it. It's a crime for you to have it. Anybody have any questions about that? So don't ask me if you can vape and drive, because you can't vape, right? Don't ask me if you can buy cigarettes, because you can't. And those are the sorts of questions that I've gotten in the past. It's very clear cut. You're not allowed to have it. You're not allowed to use it. I don't care what you're doing. It's illegal. Got it? Okay. Thank you. Now, what about if we take it up a step, General Funk, and we get into other things like marijuana?
All right. Marijuana is a Class A misdemeanor, carries up to 11 months and 29 days in jail, carries up to a $2,500 fine. If you get taken to juvenile court, you'll have to answer to that. You'll have several court appearances. And the worst thing about it is, even if it ends up getting dismissed, or if you have to do some type of probation, even if it's the type of probation that comes off your record, there are groups that specialize in running people's records. These are all 10th graders, and so you're 3 years away from, or 2 years away from making your college applications. the last thing you want to have to do when you're answering a college application is, have you ever been arrested, or have you ever had a run-in with the law? The last thing you want is to have a college interview and have that come up. The last thing you want is for the admissions director to bother to run your record or pay for one of these services and see that, because if you've got an A student from MBA or Harpeth Hall and you've got a B+ student from some school that's not as rigorous as this, but that student has a clean record, but they're afraid you might have a drug problem, or they know that you've got a drug offense on your record, which one is that admissions director going to take? They're going to take the kid that they know does not bring that kind of baggage with you. Y'all are doing a lot of hard work in this school. I don't want you to end up disqualifying yourself from a number of these great colleges that are going to want applicants like you just because you happen to have some marijuana. Or the other thing, if you're in a car and someone has marijuana in the car, even if you're not smoking the marijuana, even if you can say, well, give me a drug test because I hadn't smoked any marijuana, if that marijuana is in the car, then you are in constructive possession of it. So not only do you not need to have marijuana, you need to know who you're with. And if somebody brings some marijuana to homecoming was a few weeks ago, but let's say it's a 10th grade girl who's invited to the prom next spring. If somebody's got drugs with them, everybody's going to jail, and everybody's going to end up with that record. And you might end up getting it dismissed, but you're still going to get that arrest because of a constructive possession, and you don't want to be any part of it. So know what you've got and know what the people you're with have with them as well.
All right, one more question for you, General Funk, going up the list. What if it's a prescription drug? My mom had back surgery. She got a prescription. I find it in the medicine cabinet. What about that?
Yeah, we actually see a lot of that, and it is a real scourge. And parents, I want y'all to hear that if you've got medication and you're done with that sickness and you no longer need that medication, or if you've got some hydrocodone tablets or whatever, people get into your medicine cabinets. Every police precinct has a place where you can take your old medications and throw those away. Students, it doesn't matter if it was a valid prescription for your parents. If you've got it in the car, and even if it says your parent's name, there's no reason for you to be possessing it. If you try to say, well, this is an unmarked bottle, right? And so this is really mine. Well, that doesn't work either, because you got to have a marked prescription bottle, or else you're going to get arrested and you're going to get taken to court about whether or not you had a valid prescription for this. These are really serious issues. You know, a lot of kids might have some drugs for ADD or ADHD. And then the word that's out is, oh, well, if I take some of that drugs, even though I don't have ADHD, it's going to help me study, or I'll be able to focus longer when I'm studying. And oh my gosh, I've got to pull an all-nighter because this physics teacher is crazy. If you have somebody else's drugs, that is a crime for you to buy, and that is a crime for your friend to sell. So do not use someone else's prescription. Do not possess anybody's prescription. That is very serious, and it's a serious offense.
And one more addition to that, what if I've had knee surgery and I have pain meds that I was prescribed, I don't take them all, and I decide to give one to a friend?
If you give your prescription medication to a friend, then you have distributed narcotics, and that is a major felony.
Okay, so let's take one of those examples that we've defined as being clearly illegal, and Lieutenant McLean, you stop someone on the road for running a stop sign, and you end up finding a prescription in the car that does not belong to that kid. What happens?
Bottom line, they can be arrested. Each case is fact dependent. Officer has a lot of discretion as to whether or not to make an arrest or not. But upon his investigation, his or her investigation, they figure out that you are in possession of that narcotic, and they can arrest you. And more than likely, they will.
Okay, and then they end up down with you, Magistrate Wade. What's that like?
Tedious is the first word that comes to mind. The courts are never fun. Juvenile detention is the first stop, and that's certainly not fun. And once a child lands in juvenile detention, they contact a magistrate if it's after business hours so that we can make a determination of whether you're a threat to yourself or to others out in the community, whether you are released to a parent or if you stay put until we can have what's called a detention hearing. And a lot of that, again, is charge specific as well. There are some status offenses, things that you do just because of your age, curfew and that kind of thing, that you are not what we call non-detainable. So you wouldn't stay in detention for any length of time, but something like a drug offense, it may be a while so that we can have some team meetings and to ascertain what level of needs you have as to your use and possession of those kind of drugs. And so there'll be court dates, court costs, and more than likely some requirements as to that charge and any addiction or use issues that may accompany that.
And is there a different standard for me if I went to Harpeth Hall, my zone school was Stratford, would I have been treated the same regardless of which of those I had attended?
Absolutely, all the same, all the same. So we see a myriad of children from various neighborhoods and schools and circumstances. All of those things are the same. All of the magistrates, when we receive those calls in the evening that say you were picked up out of a car with 3 of your friends, we look at that. We don't ask what school did they go to. We say what was in the car, what does the officer report, and then we make a determination based off of that of whether you stayed the night or some nights with us or if you are able to be released to your parent.
All right, Mr. Day, I'm going to bring you into this. Okay. Homecoming has happened. I've agreed to have a party after homecoming so that my kids can stay out late, but I know where they are, and lo and behold, it ends up that there are drugs being exchanged among the kids down in my basement. What happens if one of those kids leaves and has been using drugs or, for that matter, alcohol and gets in an accident and hurts another person?
Well, once again, that's very fact dependent. Let's take the simplest example is that you as the parent did not supply the drugs or the alcohol, but you know they're being consumed. You know it. You have put your entire net worth at risk because to the extent that you know that it's occurring, you have a duty to exercise reasonable care for the safety of those young people. And some people think, well, I can solve this problem. I'll just take everybody's keys. And that way I'll make sure that they're in a good shape to drive. And parents thought that when I was in high school 50 years ago. It didn't work then, and it doesn't work now. Somebody's got a car around the corner so they can leave when they want to. So that's your risk, parents. If you don't have the courage to tell your children, no, you cannot drink, if you enable it in some way by hosting the party, even if you don't furnish the alcohol, you're putting yourself at risk. And your homeowner's coverage will hire a lawyer for you, and it may be enough to protect you from a lawsuit if that child goes out and one of the children at the party injures somebody, but you better hope it's enough.
Okay. Do y'all have any questions on those subjects? It's pretty clear, right? And the downside of taking the risk is not reasonable and is huge. Okay, so let's talk just for a minute, and I don't care who answers this, we've talked about drinking in the home and potential parental liability. How about you guys that go outside of the house and you're at a football game and you go to the parking lot and you drink and you come back, or wherever it is you are, you're out on a farm, you're out on the river, I don't care where you are, you all decide that it's a good activity for that evening to drink. Is there any amount of alcohol that these guys can legally consume? General Funk.
Okay. No.
So wait a minute, because I always get this question too. It's kind of like the vaping. Did you hear that? It's not maybe. The answer is no. There's no amount of alcohol you can consume. So can you drink and drive? No, because you can't legally drink, right? There is no amount of alcohol that you can legally possess, consume, purchase, period, until you're 21. So that eliminates a lot of the follow-up questions. What if I'm the designated driver? Oops, well, your friends in the car are drinking, right? So therefore, you're constructively in possession of the alcohol in the car. All right.
Can I just add something to that?
Yes, sir, please.
For you young people out here, the way you will meet me if you make a mistake and drink and drive and hurt somebody is I will sue you, and then I will sit down and take your deposition. So the criminal process will work its course, the police will do their jobs, the DA will do their job, but then at some point, the person who you hurt or killed they'll come and see me, and I'll file a lawsuit, and then I will ask you questions under oath with a video camera on you, and you will have to explain what you were doing. And in the meantime, you're going to be worried about your future, and you're going to be worried about how this is going to impact you for the rest of your life. And hopefully you're going to think about the person you hurt or killed. I've had to sit across from people your age who killed somebody. Now, it was a simple mistake. It was drinking and driving or texting and driving or something like that. It's nothing that I don't think people should go to hell for, okay? But those simple mistakes can kill people. Kill people. And so you think about, I would hope, that what have I done? I've destroyed another life. I've destroyed a family. I've affected the family tree. Beyond that, if you're under 18, when you got your driver's license, your parents had to sign a piece of paper, an affidavit of financial responsibility, that says that the signer is responsible financially for anything that you do. So you're not only gambling your future, you're not only interrupting somebody else's family tree, you are putting everything that your parents worked for and will ever work for on the line. And here's what people like me do, just so you know. We get a lawsuit against somebody. One of the first things we do is we look up where they live. We look up their house. We look up how long they've had that house. We figure out how much equity is in it. And then we try to figure out how much we can get. That's what we do. You're going to say, well, that guy's a jerk. It's been said before, okay? But we're hired to help represent somebody who was hurt or a family, somebody was killed, and we're looking in this type of situation. We know that some parents signed off or guardians signed off, and we know they're responsible financially. So it's not just you, it's not just some insurance company. You put your folks at risk. So there's lots of, once again, a very simple decision of looking at a text message. When you're going down the road, 5 seconds off, you're going 60 miles an hour, you travel 440 feet in 1 second. If you drift 3 feet to the left, you could hit somebody head on and kill them. And your life will change forever. Not just financially, but for lots of reasons. So please, the criminal consequences are important, the impact on college is important, but you don't want to put your head on the pillow at night knowing you hurt somebody or took their life. It's a horrible way to live.
All right. Here are some simpler questions, I suppose, that have come up in the past. Can you get in trouble for having a fake ID? Oh, look, we got Lieutenant McClain down here is picking it up.
Yes, you can get in trouble for having a fake ID. And oftentimes when we run across people who have fake IDs, they are into something they shouldn't be into. They're trying to get into a nightclub or some type of bar downtown. And that in and of itself is not a good thing. So, yes, you can be arrested for having a fake ID. So I would suggest you not do it.
So let's talk reality here for a minute about if you find yourself in a place, because as old as I am, I found myself in similar places in high school where maybe you're not the one drinking, but maybe you end up at a place where your friends are drinking. What do you do? You're there, your friends are drinking, they're about to drive, or you're there, you get news, the police are going to bust up a party. I mean, what's the responsible thing for you as an individual, the best decision for you to make?
I would suggest calling a parent to come pick you up. And there's no dishonor in that. Life is complicated enough. When you throw alcohol and drugs in the mix, it makes things a whole lot worse. It's all about the decision making. If you don't believe me, go online and you can look up, I think it was a wreck up in Michigan where 5 teenagers ended up getting killed. They all burned to death in the car. I've seen a lot of people deceased because of poor decisions. And you just don't want to be that way. And one thing I was always afraid of, I was in the military. I went in the military when I was 17. My mom had to sign me away, and I went off. A week later, I was off in the military for 5 years. And there was a lot of drinking going on. But thank God I was able to abstain from drinking. And I never drank my whole life. Not only through military, but also through college. Being a police officer for 20 years, I was able to see the effects of it. A lot of these people you see on the side of the road begging for money, a lot of them, not all of them, are alcoholics, right? So, and some of them probably have a pretty decent past. They went to school, graduated high school, some of them maybe even went to college, but they hooked on alcohol or drugs or whatever the case may be. So, my rule of thumb is to abstain from it, and also to make good decisions. If you're out with friends who are drinking, call a parent or someone. It's not like when we were coming up, you had to go to a payphone and put a dime in. Everybody has cell phones now. Call your mom or call a friend that you know, that you trust, to come pick you up and take you home, because your life could depend on it.
Mr. Day, what if this has come up before in past years? What if I'm a parent and one of my children's friends shows up at my house intoxicated? What is the best course of action for me from a legal standpoint?
Well, I'm glad you qualified that, because there's a moral question and there's a legal question. Morally, I think the answer, I hope it's obvious. Legally, you have absolutely no responsibility to help that young person. And the law is we have no duty to help people, even if they're in trouble, unless we have a special relationship with them in some way. So that's why if you have the party at your house and you know everybody's drinking and they're all minors, you have a special relationship as being the host. But if you just come upon somebody laying drunk on your doorstep or on your street, you don't have the legal responsibility to do anything, assuming, of course, they didn't get drunk at your place or your party. But morally, I think, and believe me, this is not a priest collar. I'm just an ordinary person. But you got the responsibility to get them in the house, and if you can, if they'll go, without risk of injury to yourself, and calling their parents, because that's exactly what you would hope somebody would do if it was your child in that situation. And I would add to what the lieutenant said, I think that's true if you're out with a friend who's about ready to do something stupid. Legally, you can let them do something stupid and not get in trouble for it most of the time. From a moral standpoint, you got to try to get your friend in the right path. I mean, you're not going to be able to live with yourself once again if you don't, because if something happens. I think most parents, I know what I told my kids, is that you call me at any time you need help and I will come. And I will be there. And we will have no discussion about it until the next day. We're not going to get in an argument. I'm not going to ask you to explain yourself. All I want is a telephone call and the opportunity to come and help. We'll talk later, okay? I'm sure most parents have said that. Kids, they're telling the truth. They want to be there to help you when you get in that situation. So don't worry about how angry they're going to be or whether you're going to get grounded for the big football game. let them help you out of that situation.
So I want to stay on the house issue.
Can I,
yeah,
can I
please.
just add,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
excuse me.
And I just want to add to that, too, for the young folks in the room, to please try your best to avoid those situations. I call those the perfect storm situations. So avoid being in those large groups and somebody's drinking and somebody's driving and they only have a permit and somebody snuck out and their mom doesn't know it and we're all lying about it and it's getting after curfew time and nobody knows where we are. We said we were going over here and we're really over there. When those types of things start to happen, it's really important. It's really important to go your separate way. Call a parent. And if I were you, I would call a parent on behalf of everybody. You don't want to be that child that you knew something bad was going to happen and you call or you just left and you didn't report your friends and something bad happens to them either. And so when you start seeing those things set in motion and you all have got to get a story together, that's a bad indication. That's a red flag. If there takes some planning to what you have to do, that's a bad situation. Get yourself out of it. Because just like General Funk said, if you're in that car, it doesn't matter who brought the drugs, who brought the gun, who brought the whatever, everybody's going down. And the rule is, generally speaking, officers will use their discretion most of the time, taking you off the street, and will sort it out in juvenile detention. So err on the side of caution.
John, go ahead.
Now, let me tell a true story that, it made a big impact on me. Now, I attended bar when I was in college, ran a bar for 2 years. We got in a little altercation in a little bar fight, and I helped clean it up. But afterwards, a bunch of us went out to breakfast, at 2 o'clock in the morning, same old thing. We were all drinking legally. We had too much, but we were all drinking. So the guys that we had the fight with in the bar followed us, pulled out right behind us. We were headed to this restaurant. And one of my buddies, unbeknownst to me, grabbed a gun out from under the seat and jumped up and went and stuck it in the window of these guys. Now, I want to go to law school, right? This idiot's got a gun. This idiot's got a gun. This is 1975. I spent 3 days wondering when I was going to get picked up. Whether those guys are going to call the police. And they did call the police. It so happened that it worked out just fine. But I was absolutely terrified, and I didn't know he had a gun. It can happen so easy.
I want to ask you another question, John, going back to the house situation. We talked a bit about if you knew or if you were supplying or knew alcohol was going around at your house and providing a safe place, or supposedly. What if you're out of town, okay? What if you're the parent of a 16-year-old, you're going out of town, there will be no adults at the house, you have liquor in the house because you drink liquor appropriately and responsibly. What if your kid throws a party and you've done nothing to protect against that and the same scenario happens? Somebody leaves and gets in an accident or hurts himself or someone else.
If it never, ever happened before and you had no reason as the parent to expect that the party was going to be hosted, your personal risk for that is relatively small. You would have homeowners insurance that would cover the claim against your child because your child could be sued in that situation. They're distributing alcohol. What your real risk is there is whether or not you secured the alcohol. And I've got kids 26, 22, and 10. And my alcohol was always under lock and key. I trusted my kids, but I wasn't stupid, And I just locked it up and I hit the key, and I guess they could have broken the lock, but I could have figured it out. And I would recommend to you that you figure out a way to lock up your alcohol, especially if you're going to be gone. But your risk, quite frankly, is relatively small. If you tend to know that when you're out of town, your kids have parties, then you got a big risk. because you are basically supplying the home where people are violating the law, and that was a huge mistake.
Any questions on that? 'Cause I'm going to change subjects. Easy questions. How many of you all drive? Are we clear on the issues of like how many kids you can have in the car, what curfew is, and all of that stuff? Do you guys know what curfew is? Okay, I looked it up because sometimes we've been a little confused about this. I looked it up today, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I read it is that Monday through Thursday in Davidson County, curfew is 11 p.m. That Friday and Saturday, it's 12 p.m., and that in the summer there are some different rules making it 12 p.m. Now, I have been asked in the past about like religious exceptions if you're coming from the St. Cecilia prom, right? You think I'm joking? That would be a true question in the past by very smart folks. There are some exceptions to that rule, but like that doesn't get you out of trouble, right? Going from the St. Cecilia prom. The exceptions are pretty explicit, and parents, if you know that there's going to be an exception that you approve of, under certain circumstances, you have to actually call and report it in advance that your kid is going to stay out under certain rules. So I would be very careful before I broke those curfew laws, and I would read the exceptions and make sure they apply, because I'm a trained lawyer and I had to read them multiple times. So I would go on the general rule that the curfew is 11 o'clock, Sunday through Thursday, midnight on the other days, with some different rules in the summer. There is, interestingly, in Davidson County, a proposal to make it 11 o'clock all the time in the council. That is because this year already, now listen to this, this year already we have set records on murders of kids under 18 and on the number of kids under 18 murdering other people. Like blown the records out of the water already in 2017. So, there are worried council people who are proposing in Davidson County that rule be changed to 11 o'clock all the time. And the way I read Williamson County, it's the same time period. There are a few different readings in the exceptions to the rule, but Monday through Thursday, 11, the other days, 12.
And I'll piggyback on that a little bit. I worked midnight shift for many, many years. Usually, if a kid is out past curfew, oftentimes I had zero tolerance for it. Here's the reason why. Especially if it was really late, like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. They're either committing a crime or they're going to be a victim of a crime. A lot of the nightclubs in Davidson County close at 2:30 unless they have a permit to stay open later. And if you've been up late, you know what happened. Everybody flood to the Waffle House to get something to eat. They go to the Exxon Tiger Marts and those type of things. It's gotten so bad that some of these businesses have closed down during that time period. I mean, you wouldn't believe the shots fired, the people have been shot, people have been beat up, assaulted at some of these places. So let's say you out with some friends, you go into a party. You guys decide to go get something to eat. Here it is, 2:30, you go to the Waffle House somewhere, and it's just packed full of club goers who just left the club. Some of them have had something to drink, maybe. They see you, they want to take advantage of you somehow, or something is said, or a look is passed one way or the other, and you get assaulted or even worse, killed. So save all that going out late and all that kind of thing until you become an adult and can make better decisions. I just wouldn't do it. And there's an exception to every rule. If we stop you at, let's say, 12 o'clock at night, and you call and we talk to your mom or your father, and they say, yes, they were coming from, his aunt's house, something like that, 99% of the time we're going to let you go. But if we can figure that you're out and you're nowhere near where you're supposed to be going, and the direction you're going in is not nowhere near where your house is or something like that, we think you're up to something unsavory, then we are going to lock you up. And mainly for your protection. I'm telling you. And we have set a homicide record. We're on pace to set the homicide record in Davidson County. If you look across the United States, cities like Baltimore, St. Louis, Miami, Dallas, their homicide records have soared through the roof. And so, and a lot of those are young folks who are getting in the crossfire, or getting taken advantage of. So your life depends on the decisions you make. So you don't want to risk that. So like I say, I had zero tolerance when it came to curfew violations, especially if you way out past curfew, 2 or 3 hours past curfew.
Okay, just a little review on some things. Are you guys allowed to use cell phones while you're driving? In any capacity? No, because you are under 18, right? I looked that up again today. So you can't talk on the phone. Can you use a hands-free device while you're driving? No, you can't. Not if you're have an intermediate driver's license, which from where I look is through 17 years old. So no, you can't, okay? So beware of that. Do I have questions that need to come down? Do we have, yeah. Okay, I've got one last area that I want us to address that came up a couple of years ago for the first time, and I know all the NBA boys have seen a presentation. Yes, sir. Yeah, hold on. I looked it up. I've got my cheat sheet here. Okay. Learner permit, you're only allowed to drive with a licensed driver over the age of 21, and you're not allowed to drive at all between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Intermediate restricted license when you're 16. You're allowed to have one passenger unless one or more of the passengers are over the age of 21. You cannot drive between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless accompanied by a parent or a licensed driver over the age of 21. And let's see. Yeah, so that's it until you're 18.
You could have a sibling in the car.
Yeah.
That's not on my, y'all tell them that because that's not on my little list here.
Yeah, I believe you can have a sibling in your car as well, like your little brother or sister or something
Okay.
like that. That's an exception.
Okay, I just went with the cheat sheet, left that out. Okay, here's a question for Magistrate Wade. Can you, you alluded to it earlier, but if I get brought down, can you kind of tell me exactly what's happening if I get brought down to juvenile court?
Yeah, so depending on how you get brought down, because we do see children and families in a number of different ways. Primarily, you come, unfortunately, through the back door in cuffs. An officer pulls you into our back gate. The gate closes behind you with a loud slam, and you fearfully walk in. And you stay there wondering what's going to happen. While you are essentially booked in, fingerprinted, your history is ran, your juvenile history, the officers process their arrest reports, and we get all the information we need before we contact your parent. And sometimes we contact your parent, unfortunately, and let them know you're there, but that they would be notified about a court date within the next 3 days. When that happens, it's really unfortunate on a regular situation. Sometimes it happens, for instance, on a Sunday afternoon and Monday's a holiday. It gets really unfortunate then. You never want to get caught up on a holiday. And so we have some statutory requirements about when you have to go before a magistrate so that that magistrate can make a determination on whether or not you get an opportunity to go home on that particular day or have some further court hearings. So that's the typical way for anything that, again, is a detainable, something that you would get arrested for. We also have parents that bring their children to our court and say, my child continues to run away, for instance, or my child is not going to school regularly and is being defiant at home. And those are what we call front desk complaints. And so we work with those families on a one-on-one basis, processing an assessment with them and identifying some services that may be helpful for the child and for the family. And we also have what's called the Metro Student Attendance Center that I oversee. And on that, for that, we also receive students on a day-to-day basis for loitering. So any child who is not 18 and has not graduated during school hours must be in school or with a parent. And if you're outside of school and not with a parent during school hours, then the Metro Police Department, if they see you, they will pick you up. And rather than bringing you into our juvenile detention facility, they'll bring you to my front door. And you'll see my sad, sad face saying, why are you here? And so during that time, again, we work with you, call your parent, who generally is not aware that you were out cruising the city with your buds during the school day. Ask them to come and pick you up, and you'll have a hearing before we allow you to leave with your parents. And then you'll get generally some court order requirements that may include community service, court costs, something very creative, a service learning project, an essay perhaps. Maybe, again, I do community service because I'm a firm believer if I've got to call your mom away from work, that you owe me that time. And so I ask you to do some community service. And so there are a number of ways that students come to juvenile court, and it just depends on the severity of things. We always look to try to get families help first, but again, that does not always negate the fact that in addition to help, sometimes you have some legal consequences as well.
All right, so a few questions were submitted before we move on to our very last and very important topic. Can someone with a learner's permit drive with an adult over the age of 21 who is under the influence?
I would say no, but I would have to look that up. But I would say no.
Let me
Because
ask
the
you
whole
something. Are you
point
going to look it
of-
up out there on the street?
Uh-huh.
All right, are you going to look it up while you're out on the street?
Yeah, on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah. If we can look it up on the computer. So
Okay.
we have a laptop, we can look up, we have internet service and all that kind of stuff. But the whole point of having an adult in the car is that the adult is responsible. If that person is intoxicated, then they're not responsible. So my feeling is no. If the person's drunk, then you need to have a sober person who's responsible in the car if you have a learner's permit.
Okay, if your friends have been drinking but you have not, and there is no alcohol in your car, can you be charged? So you're driving friends who've been drinking, but there's no alcohol in your car, and you have not been drinking. Is there something you, the driver, can be charged with?
I don't think so, but again, that's a poor decision that could cost you your life, without a doubt. I don't know if any of you guys ever seen an auto wreck. A lot of times you see it on TV, but seeing it in reality, being the first person to pull up on a scene like that, it's absolutely nothing nice. So I've seen people burned to death where they were alive and the car burst into flames, they couldn't get out and they burned to death. So a lot of these type of things happen. So again, just make good decisions. If you got friends who are drinking, and you shouldn't be in the car with them in the first place, call somebody to come pick you up, okay? And try to discourage your friends, like the attorney here said, and discourage them from driving in the first place, because it could cost you your life.
What if...
You haven't committed
Oh, yeah.
a crime at that point, but oftentimes you see, well, my friends had been drinking, but I wasn't. But it's the officer's discretion on the scene, and if he sees 3 kids, 2 of them have obviously been drinking, 1 of them is protesting, I hadn't had anything to drink, he's judging you by the people you're with, and he might assume that you've been drinking as well, and you might end up with a charge. And then it's a question of, can the state prove that you were drinking when in fact you hadn't? Sometimes with proper corroboration, then the court or the district attorney might believe that you weren't drinking, just your friends were. But just as Lieutenant said, that's not really something you want to get into that position. And many times an officer on the street is going to assume that if most of the folks are drinking, everybody's drinking.
All right, last question before we move to our last topic, and then if there are other questions, you guys can come and ask afterwards. What if your parents have a prescription in the car, and you are driving the car and get pulled over and it's found by the police officer, but it's your parents' prescription?
A lot of times you're going to get charged. Now, the officers are going to look at a number of different factors. How old is the prescription? Is it current? How many pills are gone? Is it a 30-pill prescription that was just filled a week ago and all of a sudden there's only 3 left in the bottle? can we get the parent on the phone and find out if this is their prescription and if they knew it was in the car? There's a number of things that an officer is going to look at, and a lot of things that the prosecutor is going to look at if it turns into a charge. It's not a guarantee that you would get charged, but it is something that we see happen, because a lot of times what ends up happening is the kids get the parents' prescriptions and the parents don't even know it. So that does happen sometimes.
So friends, we could ask these complicated questions all night, but at the end of the day, it's fairly simple, right? Try to make good choices. I'm not saying that's always easy, but you don't want to be in the position of having someone at the end of his or her shift who's tired and frustrated and, has just been out with somebody who's robbed a store, deciding whether or not, they're going to bother with this prescription that may or may not be being used appropriately, right? Just be careful and make good choices and make sure you're being responsible for your own decisions, and try to avoid these decisions that at a minimum are inconvenient for everybody involved. Okay, so the last topic that actually came up a few years ago, and I know the boys at MBA have heard some about this in social awareness, is the issue of texting and social media and online activity and pornography and sexual assault and sexting and sending images and those sorts of things. So I guess the easiest way to start this conversation is with you, General Funk, and ask, what is it that you see, and maybe you too, Magistrate Wade, what is it that you see that are issues for guys and girls this age that they're living through right now that are potential legal pitfalls?
Well, we see it all. We see just in regards to general, what we consider kind of a harassment. So sending mean things to someone via text, or posting something not nice about someone on social media, half the school's following it. The same is true for sexual images. That's a very slippery slope, because there are a lot of people. I think Nashville is a very, we're embracing and trying to figure out better ways of working with youth in particular around situations. Nobody wants to see a bright kid like you all are, go down and end up being on a sex offender registry. No one wants that to happen. But on the flip side of that, if you send sexual images of someone, then that definitely brushes up against the law. And there are laws against doing that. You all live in this fantasy world where you think images live for a very short period of time. That is not the case. I'm going to repeat that. That is not the case. When you go on to Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and all these other things, and you think you do something 1 second and you pull it back the next, or you think it disappears in 40 seconds or something. I don't use all that stuff. Is it 40 seconds? It's not gone. It is not gone. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of that other person. How would you feel if compromising images, words, threats were out there against you and you couldn't pull that back? Don't put yourself in that position. Don't put yourself in a criminal or a civil position of having to defend then if someone acts on that. If you're harassing to someone else and goodness forbid they go and harm themselves, the first place that law enforcement is going to go is to their social media. So don't you be the one with your name attached to pictures and threats and all of those kinds of things. You could find yourself in a very sticky situation, and again, it could compromise your future more than anything. It could be the difference of whether or not you get into certain colleges, whether or not you have the ability to do certain things you would want to do in your future. So be mindful of that.
General Funk?
Yeah, there's also activity that's been going on recently more and more, which is kind of a revenge porn type situation where a boyfriend and girlfriend might share explicit images of themselves with each other, but then a breakup happens and all of a sudden somebody posts something in a way where it exposes their previous girlfriend or previous boyfriend to public ridicule. That's a crime. People do that in a number of different social media settings. That's a crime, and that can get you in jail. That's something that's very serious, and not only is it serious where it can hurt you, it really hurts the other person, somebody that you at one point cared about. And that is really one of the most despicable things that young people and young adults are doing these days.
If I can add to, don't send images of yourself in compromising positions. Do not send images of yourself in compromising positions. I don't care if it's from the neck down or from the knees up. Don't send compromising pictures of yourself, ever, for any reason, to anybody. Period.
And the boys will lie, girls.
I'm glad he said it and not me, ladies, but he's right.
The boy is going to lie. He will lie. I'm an old boy. But it won't be private forever. The question is how quickly it'll be shown to somebody else. This is a fact of life. It hasn't changed since the day of the Polaroid. It still happens. There's also, by the way, something, a federal law that makes it not only a crime, but gives rise to civil penalties for distributing child pornography. And if you're under 18 and it's explicit photography, that's child pornography. And I sued a woman one time who violated that law. She was an adult. She had an inappropriate relationship with a young man, took pictures of it, transmitted it, and I sued her based on that law. It's a $300,000 minimum penalty plus attorney's fees. So, Snapchat that.
Guys, I don't, this is not intended to be terribly scary, but I'm going to tell you, one of my best friends from law school has a kid who's now 20, but when he was 17, he was a junior in high school out in California and was the student government representative for his class, and one of his friends created a funny little picture of half girl, half donkey, but with a girl that went to their school, and sent it out. He did nothing more than comment, right? He did not send it ahead. He did not do anything more. And before my friend even got a call, the sheriff's office had him in the principal's office questioning him. He ended up losing all kinds. He no longer could be a student government representative as a school. At their school, it was part of the curriculum in a class. He got totally removed from that. In addition, he got in trouble with the law outside. It wasn't anything that even I thought was that big of a deal, but it was a big deal at the moment. And my friend called me up horrified. My son's being questioned by the sheriff, and I haven't even been called, right, over this. General Funk, I'm going to give you the last word. Are there any words of wisdom surrounding, there's been a lot of information about sexual assault, consent, those sorts of stuff in the news, the Vanderbilt rape case. Are there any words of wisdom that you would like to leave with these kids, young people, as we depart?
Yeah. Most everybody knows about the Vanderbilt rape case. There were 4 individuals who were freshmen at Vanderbilt, took a woman who was unconscious, had sex with her. 1 case is still pending. 3 people have already been convicted, and they're all doing at least 15 full years at 100%. We'll see them 14 years from now whenever they're released. Sexual assault is real. Sexual assault is something that is really hurtful. One of those young men is a graduate of Ensworth. I know that this school, MBA, is very aware of it because my understanding is that the MBA Ensworth basketball game, some folks started chanting the Ensworth graduate's name, and public shaming is never a good thing, and so the administration here did the right thing and told the student section to stop, at which point the student section, after a few minutes, started chanting "no means no." which was also a form of public shaming, and that was also inappropriate. But in some ways, to repeat no means no as many times and in as many forms is a good thing, because that is a form of a public service announcement. No means no. No, but no does not mean, oh, just try a little bit harder or be more persistent. No does not mean, well, maybe she'll get carried away because I'm such a great kisser and I can do things that she's already told me she doesn't want to do. No does not mean, oh, she's saying no because she wants to feel better about herself in the morning. No means no. And if you ignore a no and do not have consent for whatever you are doing, then a touching is an aggravated sexual battery. That gets you not only in jail, but that gets you on the sex offender registry, which means you can no longer live certain places, you cannot go certain places, you cannot be at certain places, and you just can't do it. No means no. Done. Finished, right? You have to have consent for whatever it is you're doing, and if you touch for the sexual gratification someone who has not consented, that is a sexual battery, and you cannot ever do it. It's about making sure that you respect the person you're with. It's about humanizing the person you're with. It's about understanding that that person has the right to control their own body and the right to make sure that they can set boundaries for your relationship. I can't say it often enough, and I say this in almost every public forum that I'm in. Sexual assault is a very real problem that we have in our society, and people are being prosecuted for it, and folks who have had themselves violated, it changes sometimes the way they view themselves and their ability to have relationships going forward, and so you're doing very real harm. Very real harm. It's one of those things where it is all in the news now about sexual assaults by people who are in Hollywood or people who are in politics. It's also coming out more often with regards to high school settings and college settings. This is something that we really need to do, which is affirm that our relationships with people that we are interacting with, and especially with people of the other gender, we are doing that out of respect, and we're recognizing their dignity as humans. So when it comes to sexual assault, my son Sam, in the last of the Vanderbilt rape trials that went to trial, I made him come and sit through that trial. Right? He wanted to be doing other things during summer vacation, but he sat through that trial because what I wanted him to do is not only not to participate, and not only if his friends started to participate, not join in, but I wanted to make sure that if he sees something, he already knows, if I see something, I need to say something. If you see some friends doing something inappropriate, your job is to say something. If these guys are college football players and you're afraid because they're a lot bigger than you, then your job is to say something to an RA or to say something to the police or to call 911 or to get someone else involved. But not only don't participate, right? Not only respect the person that you are with, right? But also if you see someone taking advantage of somebody else, your responsibility is to speak up. And if not, just confront that person. Do whatever it takes by telling whoever it takes so that someone intervenes and we don't just look the other way and rationalize that, well, maybe nothing's going to happen. Anyway, I hate to end on that serious of a note when we were just talking about alcohol and vaping, but sexual assault is something that is really, really important. The people in this room are the leaders of our community and the future leaders of our community, and we need to stand up for recognizing the value of every other person that we're with.
And the consumption of alcohol interferes with your ability to make all of those decisions. So as Lieutenant said, and it's old-fashioned, abstaining reduces the risk that you will ever find yourself in that situation, regardless of your gender. Doesn't totally eliminate it, but it greatly reduces that risk. And I think if you ask most adults about what stupid things they've done, and if they'll tell you the truth, they will tell you that a lot of those things were done under the influence of alcohol. It's a scourge. Now, I drank. I mean, I told you, I ran a bar, I tended bar, but there's a time and a place for it, and it isn't when you're in high school. It just isn't. Sorry.
Thank you so much to the panelists. You guys, we are done. All right, friends, you're dismissed. Thank you for being here.